Hi, this is Patrick. In this video I'm going to show you how to do the Webquest project using a Bootstrap. Previous versions of Dreamweaver we did one where we used our fluid grid layout, which is just another framework, but you can see that this is basically a responsive design site that would show up on any mobile device. And so we're going to basically create a new one using Bootstrap, basically the same concept. I didn't try to redo it really much, but you can see how that is done. And so there are definitely some tweaks here and there where this could probably be even more improved, but I want to just show you kind of the gist, in part because this one has a left navigation rather than that kind of top one that is very common with Bootstrap. So we're going to do this pretty fast because I'm assuming at this point you've been learning these things along the way. So one of the first things that I like to do, especially for people who are relatively new with Bootstrap, is to create a new site in Dreamweaver. You technically could put this in the same folder as, say, your virtual tour and use the same JavaScript files and the same Bootstrap files, but in this case we're going to start from scratch. Now with this assignment too, there is some flexibility where you don't have to do a traditional Webquest. It's more that we're wanting you to create some type of instructional website that a teacher could use, for instance in a blended or could be even fully online setting, but that there's multi-pages and that there's a teacher page. But with that, I'm going to create a folder on my desktop. I would create this wherever you've been creating your files. And in this, I'm going to go ahead and create an images file. And I'm going to take a minute and I'm just going to save these images because I'm going to try to do this video pretty fast. I'm going to open Dreamweaver now, and like I said, I'm going to create a new site just to simplify this Webquest. And once again, it's really important that once you set up this local folder, you don't move things around. So that's why it's really important just to decide where you want this from the beginning. And then I could go ahead and set up my servers. Right now I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to get going. So I'm going to start with a new file. I'm going to make sure HTML is selected. I'm going to have HTML5, Bootstrap. I'm going to do create new. This is, like I said, you could use an existing. I'm going to make sure I don't have the pre-built layout, and I'm going to hit create. And so this first page is just called start. Like I said, you don't have to follow this naming convention exactly the way it is, but for this, I'm going to follow this basic process. So I have my start page set up. I'm going to then create a new CSS file. And I'm going to save this as Webquest. I'm going to save it in the CSS that Bootstrap already created for me, or that Dreamweaver created for me for Bootstrap. I'm going to save all. I'm going to close the Webquest, and I'm going to attach that style sheet. Now notice there I have this bad habit sometimes where I don't have the extension CSS. So I'm going to add that so that works properly and hit OK. I'm going to double check that that looks right and it does. So I'm going to do a save all. And at this point I'm going to put my cursor here and I'm going to create my container. And this one, especially because I want this kind of fixed width container, I'm just going to use container rather than container fluid. In fact, for a lot of my instructional websites, I don't really need the full page, so the fluid isn't, I tend to not use this container fluid, but for this I'm going to hit my container in here, and you can see that it even went above this comment. I'm just going to delete that comment, get it out of the way. At this point, I'm going to delete that one too, just so I have clear where I'm working. So in this case, you can kind of see the layout here, where it has a row here that's basically one column, another row here that's really two, one there, one here, and another one here. So I'm just going to work in this kind of framework here, where I'm going to pull up my grid row column. I'm going to double click that again so it shows up. Like I said, the first one I just want like this, and this is really going to be my header. So I could even, if I wanted to, add a header tag in this, give myself a note, and that looks good. So I got to make sure I don't lose the closing tag from my container. So after that, I'm going to add another grid row column, and this one I want to be 2. I'm going to put my cursor here. I'm going to come back, and I'm going to add one more, and I'm going to add 1. So in this case, I'm going to kind of follow suit that I did up before. I'm going to put a footer tag, and we'll say Patrick Longthal, just as footer text goes. Now here, you can see that this is kind of half and half. I don't want that, so I'm going to change this so it's this 3, and then this I want to change so it goes 9, right? So 9 and 3, right? You get to 12. So you get the way this framework kind of works out here. So up here, I'm going to delete this. Now, this text that I put in here, I want to put this image here. Now, what's unique about this is it's not a big banner image. If you actually open it in a new tab, you can see, well, you can't see with the black background. It's just a real small image, and then the rest of it is black. So if it was a full-size image, I would definitely have to use my responsive image. In this case, I don't really have to because it is going to be fine the way that the small one's been set up. But either way, then make sure, try that once more. I want to make sure my cursor's right where I want it. And then I'm going to browse for that image that I already put in my images folder. So now you get a better idea for the feel of this. But the gist of it is I can go over to my CSS, for instance, and for any of these you can take a peek at the source code that's already up here. And so you can kind of see header. It just has this background, and it's got some basic padding here. So in this case, I'm just going to expedite this a little, but my point more was I can sit there and add some background color, and by doing that, it's going to fill that all in and give the illusion that it's one big banner image. So I have my body content goes here. Now you'll get a gist, especially if you go back here, that it's basically got an H1, and then it has some text, and then an H2. So this is, you got to double click when you're in live view, and Dreamweaver likes you in live view with, so heading 1, text, heading 2, text. So by doing this way, when I start doing a save as, it will all start working better. So I could get rid of this paragraph tag here right now, and I'm just gonna highlight that. Let's see if it will let me get down here to the property inspector, and I'm going to make sure that HTML is selected, and formatting, I'll go to my H1. Same way, you should be able to just highlight it and adjust it there to the H2. You notice how it got rid of that paragraph tag. But so far, that's kind of how I want it set up. Now I just need to work on my navigation. And in so this case, you can look at it as I basically created this right here. I added a nav, and then I added this bulleted list. So I'm going to basically go over here where it says content here. This is my nav area. And so you can see that, basically I would add a nav tag, and then I would add a bulleted list, an unordered list, to do that. Now I'm just going to copy this in here, and I'm going to, in this case, get rid of this opening and closing just now that you have the basic idea. It's hitting the wrong button. Okay, let's get rid of that. All right, so I'm going to clean up my source code. And so I can see now that in this div row over here, right, the 3 column, that I basically have a nav bar or a nav tag, and in that I have the pages that I want for this. Now I'm going to later have to use CSS to adjust this and make this look more like I want, but you can start seeing this take shape. So in this example, I also have, I've done other things like the body tag. I've added a background color to my body tag of it, so I can do something like that. Here I'd go to my CSS. I'd want to go up here, body, And you can see in this example, font family is Verdana. And you don't have to have each of these, right? The idea is just if they don't have the first, computer's going to look for the second, and so forth. So I'm just going to say background color. I'm not focusing so much on making this exactly like this example, but rather giving you an idea of how to start building this out. So now my container is what I need to add a background color so we can actually see this. So let's save all. And so it's looking for that responsive image. We don't need that, so that's fine. We're going to take a peek. So whenever you get this error, and every now and then it happens with Dreamweaver, I just go to my folder wherever I'm keeping things and I take a look. And so this is where I can test and see. This generally appears to be working the way I want. I don't have all the elements in it, so it's hard to know for sure, but for the most part I'm feeling pretty good about it. So this is where, I could decide maybe my footer text, I want to add a little something. The big thing here is I like to make my footer typically center line, and I like to make it smaller. And so in this case, I added a gray background. I'm not even sure I really like it, but in the old one I had something like that. And so you notice that this has a little more white space through it. You wouldn't have to do it this way, but you get the gist. So a couple things about this would be really setting up the headings, and then this navigation, and then this button. And those are kind of the main things that I want to focus on here. So we'll first just look at our H1 and H2. You can see there's not much to it. Basically adding a font weight, adding a size. Over here, this is where you'll definitely look at the way that I've set up is if we look at the CSS. So we put it all in this nav, but we have a class of menu. And so there are just some text that I'm using over here. And the big thing that I want you to focus on more than anything is that the menu itself is that there's a border set up. Then when you get into this ordered list, the list style is none. So that's going to remove that bullet. And then that there's this hover. And so I'm just going to add this over here. And so once again, so you kind of understand what's doing this. But let's take a preview. So you can see what it looks like. It's missing the gray background, so I'd have to tweak, figure out what's going on there. You also could, use a little padding here. In this example, I think I reset it up top where there was no padding or margin, but then you can start going down and seeing how you want to adjust this. So here I'll notice that two things that I had in the container that I didn't add is this setting the font size automatically for the page and then adding some padding to get go. So I'm going to double check a couple things here. So what I did before that I didn't add is not only did I have this menu class, I also added some basic styles for the nav. So to make the width 100%, display block, and give that background color. So that gave that effect. And you can see the hover, this hover effect is coming down here. And so you start to get an idea of how this looks like. So other things I can do is, and this is something I did here, is this section of here where it's this, column large 9, this class is being controlled by the Bootstrap, but I can sit there and especially at the end add some little custom things myself. So I just added a little padding, and so that just gave that padding right through here. So just like that, that's looking pretty good. Two other things that I might do is this button. So take a look at what I've done, and some of this is just what makes it easy with Bootstrap, is I basically created this div row 12 text center, and then I add this button tag in the middle of it. And so just to kind of walk you through how you would do this, we would do this grid row. Right, in this case I want 1. Okay, it doesn't like where it is in the element, so I'm going to double check where my cursor is. Okay, so I have this down here, this footer. What I'm wanting to do is I'm wanting to add it within this. So we can see div opens, div closes, and I'm wanting to add it right under here. So let's try that once more. Okay. And so in this case, there's also this thing where you can use text center. And this is something I didn't know. I just was playing around and wanted to find an easy way to center this. So this was where I found out, well, if I add this, it will center it. So we can tweak around and see why it's working the way it is or isn't. But let's go down here. And so this is where you can add this button tag. And then for me, I wanted some type of proceed to introduction. And we can start playing around, double checking. So in this case, so it's what's throwing me off is this class row, so I'm just going to get rid of that. And then that looks exactly the way I wanted it. But you notice here I have this button, but I really want this button primary kind of color. So I'm going to take that class, and this was something, once again, I just kind of looked online to learn about. And there it goes. Now the question becomes, well, if I want to actually link to it, this is where you can see that you put this basically a tag, you wrap it around this button. So there's the opening. Let's put a closing. So clean up this a little. Let's save all, and let's see what to preview. And I can already see that my untitled, I haven't named it yet. But just like that, it's kind of working exactly the way that I want it. And so this is all looking good. In this case, I've already set these up where I've named these. So now my job is to rename this as a save as for each one of these names. Now I have to get each one right. If I name it wrong, it's not going to work right. But before I start that, I might, so you'll notice with this example compared to the old one. So the old one I did Webquest and then this line, then the name of each page. And this one I did not. So I kind of like that old way of doing it. And so this is where I would sit there and go down here and go Webquest. And especially when I'm starting doing this, I might even start by just naming the page, whatever it is up there in the heading, just so I have it. So I save that. Now I'm going to do a save as. And this is intro. And I got to get it just right. So I can't do introduction.com because then, or .html, because then my button, my links would not work. So I want to go down here. I want to save it. And hopefully you get the gist now. Once you set it up, you can just start doing your save as and reusing it. So I'm just going to continue this process with each, and then you'll get to see the final kind of framework or product that we're going to be working with before we add all the text. So just like that, I created my multiple pages, but one thing I didn't do is each one of this button down here. And so I'm going to get rid of this on this teacher page because I don't need it. Same thing on the conclusion page, I don't need it. But on the other pages, I didn't update it. So that's the one other thing I would do here. So for the intro, I'd want to go to task. So I might be proceed to task. And I would change this to task.html. I'd go to the task one, and the after task is process. Always be careful that you don't delete needed text or code. At the process, I'm going to evaluation. And then evaluation, I'm going to conclusion. So with that, I'm going to save all. I'm going to go to the one up here, and I can, when I refresh, I should see that it renamed it correctly. It did. So this is where I should be able to check introduction, task, process, and I'm noticing each of these headings telling me, convincing me that it's going to the right page, and it is. So I'm going to start back. Then I'm going to try my buttons, and they all work. So just like that, I built out this framework. For me, I would definitely, I think with the example before, I think I added some CSS to the button to give it a standard width of 250 and some padding. And so I did a few other things, but you get that now that you have this framework or this kind of template, you can then go and start adding your text. And you have to add some more CSS, for instance, to make sure that your images do what you want. And so there's some other little minor steps here and there, but this gives you the basic idea of how you'd build a Webquest or a multi-page left navigation site like this in Dreamweaver using Bootstrap. Thanks.